I've really started to use it more as almost like an AI board that I go to and I say, hey, here's where I am in my business. Here's where I'd like to go. Here are the clients that I have. What are things that I should be thinking about as I try to build this over the next 2, 3, 5 years? And you'd be surprised at what it can provide.
What's your personal experience and history with AI in and of itself? And then if there's use inside of your company, how and what are you doing with it?
So how I'm using it in my business is
Justin Dixon is the founder of Hire Tomorrow, an AI-powered recruiting firm helping private equity firms and startups build high-performing teams. With 18 plus years in talent acquisition across industries like SaaS, e-commerce, and wealth management, Justin brings deep insight into what makes hiring work. He's also the host of the Growth Capital podcast, where he speaks with PE leaders, CEOs, and founders about scaling companies and the critical role talent plays in their success.
Not proprietary in any way. I have tools that I use that help me sort and sift through applicants a lot easier. Still think about AI as like, they are not driving, I'm the driver of the bus, and I need to keep my hands on the wheel and not let it take over and drive us off a cliff. And one thing that I've added to some of the prompts is saying like, give me a non-obvious answer.
Do you do anything specific from an HR kind of perspective with the AI that's unique or creative? Are you doing useful things that you've come up with or stumbled across that help you in the job itself?
I would say yes, and the jury is still out on some of these. So,
all right, hello again, everybody. This is your host, Jeff Torello, to the AI for Business Owners podcast. And my guest this week is Justin Dixon. Justin, let the audience know who you are and what you got going on.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to chat. Justin Dixon. I am based in Austin, Texas. I grew up in Pennsylvania, but moved to Austin almost 5 years ago. I've been in the recruiting industry for my entire career. Started in 2006 when I got out of college, and rightly or wrongly, never got out of it. And I've worked inside at startups. I've worked inside at big Fortune 30 companies. And then in January of 2020, I decided to quit a stable job as head of recruitment for a wealth management firm in Philadelphia to start Hire Tomorrow, which is my own recruiting firm. Little did I know that COVID was going to completely ruin the recruiting industry for about 12 months. So not a great start to entrepreneurial life.
Start.
That's right. Yeah. But I'm still here, still around, which is great. And so, like I said, moved to Austin, Texas in October 2020. And right now I do a lot of work, primarily working with private equity firms and their portfolio companies and other startups, helping them find the right talent, whether it's, post-acquisition, they need to fill a few C-level roles, or it is, I get brought in by that C-level person to help them rebuild or continue to expand their team. So,
Got it.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun working with a lot of small startups and seeing them grow, and long may it continue.
And is it just you, or do you have a team that you're working with?
So it's primarily just me. I've got an operations associate that I work with who helps with a lot of the back end office admin and research and things like that. And then I bring in kind of consultants as needed, whether it's a big project or we need a specific recruitment focus or anything like that. But the day-to-day operations is me.
Okay, makes sense. Are you do you have a particular niche from you're doing all technical, you're doing all C-suite, or is it whatever is necessary?
Yeah, I mean, I love the question and I also hate the question because I've been a generalist my entire career. I tell people I've placed everything from a CEO to a forklift driver across a myriad of industries. So I like to tell my clients, like, I can be your one throat to choke when it comes to recruitment. You tell me what you need, I go find it. I truly believe that good recruiters can find almost anything. So my primary skill sets that I focus on or have a lot of success with are accounting and finance, whether it's C-level or mid-level, and then sales and marketing. I do a lot of work with B2B SaaS companies. And so post-acquisition, the three areas that private equity typically wants to bolster are financial reporting. So they typically bring in a CFO, whether it's full-time or fractional, and then they typically will bring in their own sales and marketing leaders. And so that's typically where I start.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Started in 2020.
Yeah.
That had to have been an interesting year.
Yeah, I mean, it started out great. Like, I should back up probably, I don't know, a year or so. I'd always thought about kind of starting my own business, and I figured the best thing and the easiest thing to do is start a recruiting business, given that that's my profession, and I've built, a brand in Philadelphia. I lived in Philly for 10 years. And so that was the plan. So my wife and I, we read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad about a year or two prior. And that kind of changed our mindset around, you know, growing up in a small town, my financial acumen and my kind of teaching about what you should do to get from graduating high school or college to retirement is just get a good job and invest your 401k and then hope you've got enough money to retire. Little did I know that there's a ton of other options and permutations to how you can get from A to B. And so that book kind of flipped the script and kind of turned a light bulb on. And so I very quickly realized I needed to shift what I was spending and investing my time in, as well as my money. So again, we kind of flipped our mindset. We bought a duplex in 2019 out in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So we were trying to get into the passive income game. We really did a lot of work the year prior to me quitting to start Hire Tomorrow to get our mindset in the right frame to take a risk, because my wife and I are both very risk averse people. And also to get our financial foundation built enough that I felt comfortable that we had a safety net if things went wrong. Little did we know that
If
they
a
were going to go
pandemic
really wrong
arrives
with
3 months
COVID.
into your, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So we downgraded our lifestyle. We condensed our expenses as much as we could, and we owned a condo in Philly. We ended up renting that out to get additional passive income, and then I took the plunge in January, and then got smacked in the face, a month or so later when everything was shut down, and I went
Right.
from feeling great to feeling like pretty crappy for a good length of time.
It had to have been extremely rough just to even find clients, never mind place people. But was there any action from a remote perspective for you, or were you just struggling for the first year or so, no matter what?
Luckily, I had a little bit of runway coming into January, and I had a few clients that I was working with. But yeah, I mean, it was very sparse out there. And so, one thing that really was a benefit was I had a lot of time to research and talk to people and help people essentially give my advice for free, right? There's a lot of
Okay.
people that were unsure about what to do, how to do it. And, luckily I have a wealth of knowledge of what it's like to be an internal recruiter, what candidates should do to, position themselves as best as they possibly can for a recruiter to look at their job or look at their resume. So I spent a lot of time like helping people, giving them advice, like here's what you should do and shouldn't do. Just to kind of keep going because, it was pretty sparse. And then moving to Austin was, a welcomed kind of change in our lives. So my wife got a job down here at a cyber startup, and we were like, hey, let's just get the heck out of here. We thought about moving out of the Northeast anyway, and this was just a perfect opportunity. I can do what I do from wherever. And obviously the world went fully remote. So it allowed me to really get clients anywhere that I could. And Austin is a massive, not Silicon Valley massive, but a massive startup and kind of private equity venture capital ecosystem. And I just got plugged into that. And that's been really great and a lot of fun to help small businesses who don't have the capacity, funding, time to really, or brand to attract talent from a job posting perspective. Like, think of any big Fortune, 50 company, the name brand. And if you want to get a job there, you're going to apply. Right. And so being a recruiter in one of those companies is not as difficult potentially as being a recruiter in a small business. Their only mode is post and pray. You post a job and you pray somebody good applies.
Right.
And so they also don't want to spend a ton of money on outsourced recruiting because they have a small business and they need to run it. And so I've been able to really structure some agreements with folks to make it advantageous for all parties, and they get the full effort of myself to go out and find them talent. And, hopefully that is probably better talent or different talent than what they would have received just by posting a job.
Okay. No, it makes sense. I like that. And congrats for making it through.
Yeah.
Obviously it's 2025. You're in a better spot than you were.
Yeah. I mean, the good thing about recruiting firms is the good and the bad thing is they're very low barrier to entry. And, in order to keep it, you can do this very, very minimally cost perspective. So I didn't have a brick and mortar store. Like I wasn't
Right.
paying,
Right.
other people. So it was really just, my personal income, when I think I made less than half of what I made as a W-2 employee the year before. And so that was not fun as a person to, take a
Not at
massive
all.
pay cut.
No.
But then since then, it's been pretty much better than I could have expected, frankly. And it's been, yeah, I mean, there were definitely days where it was, what the heck did I do? Why did I do this? I maybe screwed up myself and my family's life and financially and all that stuff. And luckily that didn't happen. And luckily I had a very supportive wife who was, not saying, "What are you doing? You got to get a job or whatever," because I couldn't get a recruiting job. Nobody was hiring recruiters, right? So
Yeah, no. I mean, you had low overhead. Think about it if you'd been in Manhattan or even in Philly and you were trying to open a retail store in January of 2020, and then
I know I've talked to many people that they opened fitness studios in 2019, 2018, and unless you're backed and you have a lot of reserves to keep that afloat, people didn't go back to in-person boutique fitness studios overnight, right? Obviously, Peloton blew up and, everybody bought a Peloton or started working out from home and all that stuff. So yeah, it was a very weird time for everybody,
I
not
think it
just in the
was weird
recruiting
in
world.
every industry everywhere, and certainly starting a business or trying to maintain a business was not remotely simple. Even large businesses had a lot of issues, as we have seen over the last couple of years. Let's shift a little bit. Let's obviously theoretically this is an AI podcast, so we should probably mention the word AI somewhere in here. I
Yeah, absolutely.
obviously I'm teasing. What's your personal experience and history with AI in and of itself, and then if there's use inside of your company, how and what are you doing with it? And then I'll have some follow up about specifics. I have a couple questions I have in mind, but
Yeah. Yeah, so I use it, when it first kind of became mainstream, I probably did what a lot of people did and use it to write a better email or write a better, drip campaign or whatever. Because I'm not a marketer. It was nice for me to just be like, I'm trying to reach this type of customer, let's just write me a 3 email drip campaign. And I did that, right? And very early on, that was what I did. And then, luckily, I'm part of an entrepreneurial coaching group that we meet once a quarter out in LA. And luckily, one of the guys in that group wrote a book called The AI Driven Leader, I think is what it's called.
okay.
Yeah, The AI Driven Leader. And that book talks about, and he presents to companies about not using AI just as a tool to write a better email or a better marketing campaign, but think of it as a thought partner. Think of it as somebody that has access to every single book that's ever been written, and you can recall, or it can recall information, from any of those books pretty much instantly, right? And so I started thinking of it as a solopreneur, that I don't have other people in my business that I can bounce strategic ideas off of. And so I really started using it as a thought partner. I essentially, created a prompt and went in and started being like, "Hey, you are, an expert in business consulting." And I can't remember the exact thing I said, but one thing that this book kind of talks about, and the guy that wrote it, his name's Jeff Woods. He talks about like having it interview you and to get more information, and then it can then help you think through your problem. So, one day I was sitting around and I just kind of did the audio, the voice. So I talked to it, it talked to me, which was a little trippy at first. Chat and I had a really interesting
Chat and I.
conversation. Yeah. Where I was like, here's what I'm trying to solve for. I'm trying to get into this industry, or I'm trying to attract this type of client. What are things that I should be aware of? What gaps should I, that am I not aware of, et cetera? And you'd be surprised at what it can provide. That some of it's obvious, some of it's things that you and I could sit down and talk for 5 minutes and think about, but also some of it was things that I hadn't really thought about, or it was talked about in a way that I wasn't aware of. And so I've really started to use it more as a almost like an AI board that I go to and I say, "Hey, here's where I am in my business. Here's where I'd like to go. Here are the clients that I have. What are things that I should be thinking about as I try to build this over the next 2, 3, 5 years?" And that's been a real help for me to just kind of take ideas out of my brain and put it into chat and have it, tell me what's right, what's wrong, what things I should be thinking about, what things are going on in the broader, global economic, area that may impact what I'm thinking or trying to do, both positively and negatively. Um, so broadly, I still use it as a tool to help me refine things. I don't like to write So I say, hey, I'm trying to write this article. I'm trying to write this blog post or something. And I effectively have it start. I kind of think about AI as it gets you probably 70 to 80% of the way there. And then I like to tweak it because it puts words in there that I wouldn't personally use. The grammar's a little bit different. And so I will kind of take it that next 20 to 30% and post it. But I mainly use it from a chat perspective, from more of a thought partner AI board, more strategically minded.
So there's actually a formal concept for what you're doing. Talked about it in an earlier episode, but it'd probably be helpful to just to give you a little bit of background to make this more valuable to you. So what you're actually doing is, in some context here, you're creating a persona, and you can actually frame that persona depending on what your objective is with, in some cases it's a famous person, in some cases it's a well-known scientist or a well-known business pro or whatever. The models have enough training on general knowledge information and then enough additional details about specific, like if you wanted to ask questions of, so Jack Welch, who ran GE for a very long time, is regarded as an astute business person. If you wanted Jack Welch kind of advice, you could tell the AI, I want you to take on the persona of Jack Welch. You're, exemplary at business, whatever you want to say.
Yep.
The more you describe it, the more details you give it, the more specifics that you provide it, more like that persona, that character, that motif, the model will take on. What I used in the past is the idea that you can ask it to be Albert Einstein, and you can tell it to expound on a really interesting concept, but say, hey, you're talking to a group of young children, and it will, when you do that, will take on the persona so much that it'll even start throwing in a little German phrases and a little bit of cuteness, because it gets into the persona really deeply. And I didn't quite explain that the last time I talked about this, but like, you could even make a panel, and this is just a prompt, right? You could make a panel of these three people and ask for 3 different opinions of the same question. And you'll get a miniature, like a 2 or 3 sentence paragraph from each of those angles. Now, it will still be creative. It'll still make some stuff. You weren't going to get direct quotes. If you asked for Steve Jobs advice, you may or may not get an exact Steve Jobs thing. But it will give you, and I've done this enough testing-wise to be impressed about how it works. It will be very close to what your impression of what Steve Jobs would say when you ask that question. You'll feel that it's realistic. You're talking to an engine that processes language. Obviously, it's not, it's not
apples to apples, but it's
right.
It's
close. Apple. Did you do it on purpose?
I did not actually, but that was no pun intended. Yeah. And I've done that. I've created kind of an AI board where I've got really a kind of 4 people. I've got kind of a CEO or a chairman that's really more general business operations. I've got a finance person, a sales, and then more of a marketer. And I haven't gone as far. This is something I literally just started like 2 weeks ago. And, I've just started to play around with the idea of having it kind of respond based on each one of their skill sets. Right. And so each one of them will have a little bit of a different opinion. And it's been helpful for me, again, as a solopreneur, but this can be applied to any person.
Yeah, no,
really.
Totally. This works for anything. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And what's really, from a, long-term business perspective, I'm not sure that I would keep my CFO, just to make a case, as the AI forever. Right.
Yeah.
But I think it's just as valid. I'll try and frame it this way. If you're willing to go to Google and search for, as a small business owner, how do I maximize my taxes? I don't know, whatever, pick a topic, right? And read the responses, asking the AI is the same thing. The AI is trained on the same content that you're searching through Google for, but it can actually give you the answer without you having to read 5 links and decide which one's the right one. So from the point of view of, well, it doesn't know what it's talking about, my response to that is, neither do you when you're reading a web page that may or may not have been written by someone who knows anything about accounting, as an example, right? I'm not trying to suggest that there are all these nefarious people out there trying to make fake websites. I'm just saying it's as accurate as you grabbing a magazine and reading an article and going, oh, okay, I'm going to follow that path for the rest of my career. No different. I think what I am like better from an AI query about, a topic, it doesn't matter. You could say, how do I import product for less money. They don't give you strategies. They may not all be accurate anymore in the current tariff environment. Maybe they're, who knows?
Yeah.
But the same thing, if you went to Amazon and ordered a book on it, it wouldn't know either. The book would be out of date, right? So,
well, I was gonna say you're getting dated information, right? So
absolutely.
At least
right.
AI is somewhat more up to date, obviously. So, and one thing that I've added to some of the prompts is saying like, give me a non-obvious answer, not something that, I could get out of a book or I could get out of, just by me thinking about it harder. And that's helped to kind of think about things in a very unique way when it comes to business or go after a different client or a different prospect and things like that. It's not all, again, and I may be a little bit more pessimistic, kind of cautious. I take it with a grain of salt, right? Because I have had it hallucinate on me when it can't access certain things. So I always ask it if it's going to reference something, give me your source and all that stuff. And
Right.
so I try to be as, I try to use it as much as I possibly can, but also make sure I'm not using it. I still drive, right? I still think about AI as like, I'm the driver. They are not driving. I'm the driver of the bus, and I need to keep my hands on the wheel and not let it take over and drive us off a cliff.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. The reason Microsoft named it Copilot was explicitly to suggest that it's not the pilot.
Yeah.
Same concept. I think a lot of people like the idea of an assistant, and that makes perfect sense. Logical break there. Your comment, I like your comment. One way to maybe embellish your comment a little bit is when you're asking for an answer, ask for the traditional answer and ask for the creative non-standard answer like you're suggesting, but ask for both of them so that you have the ability to compare and contrast yourself as the person making the decisions. And maybe the non-standard answer gives you let me pursue this for a second, because again, it's just some questions, right? So maybe you go down that rabbit hole for 5 minutes and say, I don't think I can use that, but I learned something and maybe I'd use it in a different way later. Cool. Great. Just like, reading a resource. The other thing I wanted to touch on for a sec, your commentary about hallucination. There's a bunch of different options for why that takes place, different explanations. But I think I would relate two pieces of data that would help you and the audience to understand how to combat the hallucination problem. The first one is, unfortunately, Google has trained everybody for the last 20 plus years to not embellish their search queries. Because when you're using Google, you're doing a keyword-based search, you're looking for this word or these words or this phrase on these pages. But when you're using an AI, you're doing something called a semantic search. And what's actually happening for the most part is a meaning-based search. So it's not looking for words that match. It's looking for context that it knows about that matches the meaning of what you're asking for. And what that does, when you're not looking for keywords and you're looking for meaning, right? So when you're asking an AI versus when you're asking a regular search engine, you need to provide more flowery contextual information to derive the value of the meaning that you're trying to get across. And what that boils down to is you need to write more sentences. You need to provide more detail. The more input you give the model, the better output you can get. And what that's referred to in the industry now is something called context engineering, right? And the simple answer, and I think I've used this before, but we'll try again. If I just ask the model a poor question like, what are bats made out of? The model doesn't know, the AI doesn't know if I'm asking about an animal that can fly with leathery wings or I'm asking about a thing that can hit a ball.
Yeah.
Because I didn't provide enough context.
Right.
If I just change my sentence and add more detail, right? What are American baseball bats made out of that are not metal? And now I'm going to get ash, birch, the types of wood that are used to make bats. And it has enough context. So when we're asking questions, it serves us well to just, for anti-hallucination reasons, be more explicit instead of what you've been trained by Google to do for years.
Right.
Include more context. And I also have seen, since ChatGPT introduction in the end of 22, I've seen the models get better at inferring. But again, if your prompt ended up being a little curt, you're rolling a dice because it's going to have to fill in what it doesn't totally understand. So it's going to make guesses, and that's where you get hallucinations from. Do you do anything specific from an HR kind of perspective with the AI that's either unique or creative? And I don't want you to give away secrets, so don't give away how your business works. But are you doing useful things that you've come up with or stumbled across that help you in the job itself?
I would say yes, and the jury is still out on some of these. So the recruiting world is pretty ripe for AI disruption in some areas. I think this is consistent with a lot of people and companies is they're just trying to put AI into everything because AI is the new thing, and they're doing it. And I've talked to a few people that they're implementing some things, and I'm like, well, what if this happens? And they're like, well, I didn't think about that. And so you're almost like they're just going as fast as they can with AI without thinking about risk. And I'll just leave it there. So how I'm using it in my business is not proprietary in any way. I have tools that I use that help me sort and sift through applicants a lot easier. I have tools that allow me to, when I create a job opening in my applicant tracking system, this tool that I use is called Loxo. It's not an uncommon tool. It will sort through my database and the database that it has access to, and essentially bubble up candidates that it thinks are good. I can then turn on custom outreach to these candidates and effectively almost do some of the sourcing. The essential sourcing just means I search for candidates, I find candidates that I like, I reach out to those candidates and hope they respond. That's effectively, in a very small nutshell, what sourcing is. It's the proactive outreach to candidates versus the applicants that are coming in, that are actively looking for a job. So there are some tools that are getting better at being able to think like a recruiter, to look at their database. Let's just think about LinkedIn, where I go to source for candidates. It's searching those LinkedIn profiles, and it's getting better and better about deciding, is this candidate good, compared based on what they provide on their LinkedIn profile, based on what I'm looking for or what my client's looking for. I haven't found one that I trust enough to take my hands off the wheel and let it reach out to candidates for me. And that's probably just because I haven't spent as much time with it, because my clients and I try to be a little bit more white glove and not, outsource everything. I like to be a little bit more bespoke to what my clients need, rightly or wrongly. And, I know there's people out there that are literally using AI in recruitment for everything and are successful, and fair enough. There are a lot of tools that I'm not using yet. One, for example, is AI interviewing. I don't feel it's necessary for what I do, being a little bit more custom. I'm a smaller shop. I'm not doing high volume searches. So I don't feel the need to use AI to actually conduct interviews. Personally, I think there's some risk in that when an AI is capturing everything that a candidate, which is a human person, says, which could open that company who's using that tool up to being sued because they capture information that was discriminatory, et cetera, et cetera.
Gotcha.
And so that's one tool that I'm not using yet. I've talked to candidates that have used it. Some like it, some hate it. Some outwardly say I will not apply to a company that uses AI. I think New York, and don't quote me on this because I got it secondhand, but I've heard that New York is either passing or passed a law that if you post a job and you use AI in your interview process, you have to disclose that in the job posting. That could be completely incorrect, but I could see that happening. Not to go too big on a tangent, but probably 10 years ago, pay equity was a big thing. So, being transparent on salaries. There are certain locations, certain cities and states where you have to disclose. If you post a
Right.
job in that state, you have to disclose what the pay is. I
Right.
could see AI interviewing being kind of going down that track where you have to disclose or say that you're using AI as part of the interview process, especially when you're doing like verbal interviews. I could see that going down that road. So there's a lot that I think you can get a ton of efficiency by using AI if you spend enough time to set it up. One of the people I talked to that has a bigger recruiting firm than I have, they spent months trying to get their AI sourcing tool, the one that sifts candidates and sorts them and puts them in buckets, to be as effective as a recruiter. So it's not something that you can just plug it in and it's perfect, right? And I think that's pretty true about a lot of things. You have to really massage and train, because I recruit differently than if you were a recruiter or another recruiter. Like, we all have our tips and tricks that we've used and found out over the years. And if I was probably getting into recruiting today versus, when I did in '06, I probably would be using AI and everything because it would be easier to learn it then. That
I
was a
have a
really long-winded
couple.
answer, but
No, no,
there's
no. It
some
was a good
things that
answer.
are, yeah, there's
W-
some things that I like about what's going on. But there's also some things that I'm like, it's almost like autonomous taxis, like the Waymos. I'm gonna let other people sort that out before I jump into one. Not to say that I won't in the future, but I'm gonna let other people figure that out. And
Right.
that's how I feel a little bit about AI interviews.
The first thing I'll say is applicant tracking systems have existed for a long time. They are not the advent of the AI. They've been around for a long time. And they've done candidate matching forever. And the way they do that, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but there's a reason why I'm bringing it up. The way that they've always done that is look at the job description, look at the resume, and match keywords. I have a supposition that I don't have facts to back up. So I'm going to do a hallucination like I'm an AI. I think a lot of the ATSs who tell you they do AI candidate matching aren't using an AI at all. I think they're just labeling it. Here's what I mean. I explained a minute ago how searches are different between regular search with keywords and searches that are searching for meaning using the AI as an inference engine, right? You probably wouldn't get a percentage match if you were doing inference matching, but almost every ATS shows you a percentage match for this candidate against a JD because they're doing keyword matching. Now, I will admit up front, and I'm not writing ATSs, that if you post a job description and you list skills, you have resume, you'd like to see how many skills are on that resume because that's how the world works. That's how brains work. That's how people work. But as a recruiter, this is probably more germane for the way you think about things. So what I would suggest to you is see whether you can find an ATS that actually implements AI-related matching. Wouldn't it be cool to find candidates that have similar meaning in their background to the tasking and not necessarily just the keyword?
Yeah, I just don't know how, because we're
Right. So what
reliant.
would happen is the AI would have to do that by looking at the job description and seeing, oh, they're looking for someone who has skill doing this. This role over here is really that skill. It just doesn't have that keyword in it. Let me show that to Justin and see what he thinks. But again, I don't think any ATSs are doing this right. Maybe I'm giving away something someone should be writing. I'm not writing it, so I don't really. Everybody can have it for free. But the point being, keyword matching is like the Google searching of old, and I'd rather go the AI route because I think it's an improvement in a certain way. I don't mean specifically that you can go implement that. I was saying to you, if there are tools that are doing that, it would be worth your time to play just to see whether you get better results. It would be along the lines of, hey, show me the standard candidates and give me one or two. These are off the wall, but they might work. And you would want that just to be able to offer your client potentially a creative opportunity, candidate-wise. And I don't think any ATS right now is going to do that because, again, they're going to be all focused on how many keywords match on this resume.
Yeah, no, and I don't know the back end of how they're doing it, but yeah, I mean, most of them, to your point, have had the candidate matching for a long time. And, if I could speak something from AI into existence, it would be the ability to parse a resume. The fact that we still can't figure out how to parse a resume is mind-blowing to me. And I know it's probably because everybody has a different style and flavor of resume, and people are adding different things that, systems can't sort through. But, it's still funny when I see people, say I've applied to, X number of jobs and how many that they upload a resume. It says you hit the button parse. And then the next screen is tell me your name and your job and your education. And it's like, what is going on?
Why did I upload this file? I'm typing it all myself.
That's right.
Yeah. And who's the worst offender of that? Workforce.
Yeah. There's a ton of big ones that
I have a theory on this too. You hit a hot button for me, so I'm going to give you my theory and then we'll let you keep going. But my theory is this.
yeah, go ahead.
Just that the candidates are the only ones that have this pain.
Yes and no, because the employers are having candidates abandon that may be really good. And that's a big problem because, if you're a passive job seeker, but you really want to go work for ABC company and they have a
Right.
job and it's like, cool, I can just go apply to this job. I hit the apply button and parse. And then I've got to sit there for 30 minutes and type in all this other information. Well, I'm done. Nope. I got a day job. So
Right.
I would agree that there's more immediate pain felt by the candidate, but there is some downward pain felt by the employers, because we looked at this a lot. When I was at Comcast, we looked at our abandon rate, and it was significant. And
Were they using, I said Workforce before, but was Comcast using Workday?
No, not at that point. No,
Okay.
they had switched. As I was leaving, they switched to Workday.
Yeah. Workday's the one that I've had the most experience with being the worst at parsing. And when I was in a stretch looking for a role, I would basically just not apply to the job if it was a Workday link. If I saw the link, I
Yeah.
would be like, forget it. I'm not even doing it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it turns out in some context, it was because my resume wouldn't parse by Workday very well. Their engine just didn't like my format. But at the same time, I'm not typing in everything on my resume. I've had
No,
a 25-year career. I'm not typing it.
and this is something that I would tell people, and I still tell it today, is, you may want to have two resumes that say the exact same thing. One is very bland, but it is parsable. And then one that is PDF fancy. And so how I explain that to candidates is I'm like, all right, you want to get your resume into the system and have it be as clean as possible, because even if you hit parse, sometimes as a recruiter looking at that, I may see it jumbled. And then if I'm a recruiter and I've got 150 applicants, I'm on to the next one. And so you want something that is going to get into the system as simple and easy as possible. And then if you have a candidate or a recruiter reach out to you, you say, hey, cool, I'd love to schedule an interview. Here's my updated resume. And you send them via email the really nice, pretty one that's got charts and bullets and formatting and all that fun stuff. And, just another thing, as we're talking about resumes, I still see people having errors on their resume, formatting errors, grammar errors,
Spelling
anything.
errors.
And it's like, we are in an age with AI that should not happen. You can upload your resume into ChatGPT and say, double check this is, anything I should change on this, and it will. And you can do a lot more with AI when
Right.
you
Right.
upload your the job description, a link to the company, and say, I'm applying to this job. Here's my resume. What should I highlight and low light? But at the very least, it should be a double check for any formatting or spelling errors, et cetera, et cetera. So
It's amazing how small little mistakes like that bring out when people see them. It's just a lot of inference about what that means.
yeah, I was talking to a guy on my podcast 2 weeks ago, and he is a startup founder, and he started a business, and he's still kind of doing a lot of the day to day, and because it's a still relatively small company, but he's like, he had like two really good on paper applicants, and he's like, I'm not interviewing this one because they have errors in their resume. And his comment was, if they take little care of their resume when they're trying to put their best foot forward to get a job, how are they going to be when they're comfortable in their position? And
Yeah, I know a lot of people that think that way. Yeah, completely. Let's round this down with just a fun question for you, and let you just think about anything you want there. Just given the experience that you have to date with AI, and what you specifically do and what's important to you, what AI thing that you'd like to see exist that doesn't exist today, what would you invent or create or wish for?
Well, I guess I'll answer it in this way. One thing that I'm working on, because I do a lot of work with small businesses, right? And this exists in forms and fashions in the world, but I'd like to see it be very polished and widely used. And this is essentially kind of what we talked about earlier, is a persona, so that a hiring manager can go in and create a custom job description for the role and for the company and for their team and personality. Now, this is going to take some effort and some input from the hiring manager, but what most people do when they're like, hey, if I need to hire a salesperson, right? I may go to a rival recruiting company, look for a salesperson job description, download it, and then just change the top and say, hire tomorrow's hiring a salesperson versus, a competitor. And while that's fine enough, one thing I've started to do with my clients is I said, hey, let's sit down with ChatGPT. Let's have it interview you. Let's have it understand who you are, who your business is, what your personality is. One of the clients actually had done a personality profile recently, so they uploaded that information into ChatGPT. And then he said, here are here's the position that I'm trying to hire for. Here's what we're trying to do short and long term. And I'd like you to create a job description that highlights those things. And that job description is not massively different than, something you could just copy and paste or write yourself, but it's helpful. And then it provides kind of what the personality profile of somebody, if you have done a personality profile, that you should be looking for. And it provides some interview questions that you can ask to hit on the top things that you want to find in a candidate. And while all of that stuff is easily creatable just by sitting down and thinking about it, one thing it has done for my clients is it's given them some insight into how to think about interviewing, how to maybe think about the job that they're trying to hire for similarly or differently than they've originally thought. I've had one client, they're like, I thought I was going to hire a salesperson, but I realized that I need to hire a marketer because most of my marketing or most of my sales are marketing driven. And I need to say a very strategic marketer and maybe a sales manager, not a director of business development. And so, again, all of these things, you could probably sit down with ChatGPT and get there mostly, but having that kind of created and usable by somebody in my industry in recruiting, because a lot of the AI tools that are out there are created by technologists that have never sat at a desk and done recruiting. And that's a different thing than just creating a tool to do recruiting.
Yeah, in fact, by definition, if you're good at recruiting, you probably are not also a developer.
Right.
As such, you probably are not writing the best tool that a recruiter would want or need.
I don't know how many times I've been in meetings in companies that we are implementing a new tool, a new system, whatever, and we have the technology teams of both the technology company and our company, and they're like, hey, well, it'll fit into the system this way, and this is the workflow that you've got to use. And I think, well, that's not how we actually do our jobs.
Right.
And then then it's like, well, and then you got to create all these Frankenstein workarounds, and then it just breaks and whatever. So that was a long. I think
no, it's
I think
fine.
I like that
answer.
created. I think there's a lot of value there. And also probably fairly simple to create, frankly.
I actually think the one nugget I'd pull out of there that's also interesting, and as a side note, is the idea that when you're creating tooling, use a subject matter expert to help you actually design it correctly, rather than just go make a thing that you think might be good, but may not be usable or workable in the scenario. So, yeah.
Yeah. And the last thing that everybody wants to do is change, right? And so if I've got to change my process to fit into the technology, I've seen it happen. I just will do my own thing, right? I'll create a Google Doc that I'll be just as efficient in and, do something different. So,
yeah, if you can have a very compelling improvement in some way, you can generally get people to adjust. Depends on how big that adjustment is. But like we were just talking about with Workday, if I'm uploading my resume does not do me any good and I still have to type everything, and I don't know if, because you couldn't parse my resume, does that mean that the person who's going to see the resume on the other end can't read it? And is this all completely a waste of my time? And how many of these am I going to do today as I scramble to apply for a job? See ya. I'm going to the next option.
And last thing I'll say about AI, and one thing that's interesting that's been happening in my world, and is that you can hire an AI bot to apply to hundreds of jobs for you. And while as a candidate, you're like, cool, I just hit the easy button and I can go golfing as opposed to sitting in front of my desk for 6 hours and applying to jobs. The bad thing is, and by the way, that AI will create a custom resume for each job based on the job description.
Right.
Again, in theory, awesome. What's happening is a lot of my clients are essentially, we're getting inundated with resumes. Like one of my clients posted, I think it was like a marketing manager job. So a mid-level marketing person for a mid-sized company. And she got 1,200 applicants in 48 hours. And she's an HR department of one. And she is not a recruiter. She doesn't like recruiting. And her whole thing is like, how am I going to sort through 1,200 applicants?
You're not. No one is.
Right. And also, there's a lot of fake applicants in there. And that's the biggest challenge is that we're getting
many.
Yeah. And so a lot of clients are then saying to me, like, we don't want to post this job. We just want you to go find the person. And I'm like, cool, let me just go do what I do. And then you don't have to worry about sifting through 1,200 applicants. I'll probably give you, 5 to 10 that you can sort through that are kind of on the money of what you want.
Yeah, and that's been going on since pre-AI. In fact, that was even leading up to pandemic. It was getting to the point where there were so many applications coming into roles, doing a lot of hiring prior to 2020. What's funny now, the other side of this equation that you may not necessarily see is the fake applicant stuff has now moved to the fake job stuff. What I mean by that is I get inundated on LinkedIn with messages from, accounts that are obviously look like trash saying, we love your skills and experience. We'd love to have you apply for my company's moving into the industry, blah, blah, blah. Here, send me a Telegram message. What? Nobody does recruiting over Telegram in the United States.
Send me a fax.
It may be out, right? Well, yeah. Or what's your WhatsApp? No recruiter in the U.S. is ever going to ask me for my WhatsApp. It's not happening. So those are easy scams to detect right now, but they're not going to be easy soon. They're one of the things to keep in mind. The AI is amazing at language. So what you used to rely on to detect a scam message because it was bad wording is gone. The AI
let me ask you this,
great,
because I'll become host for 2 seconds here and ask you a question, because you're way more into the AI world than I am. I've been talking to some people, and one of the guys was kind of a doomsdayist person, and it was more of like, we're going to get to the point where we don't trust what we're seeing and what we're hearing to be actually true, and to the point that you and I may be bots doing this interview. We don't know. You don't know if I'm true or not, or real or not, right? Obviously you do, but like eventually if AI gets as good as it says it's going to get, how are we going to trust that what we're seeing is true or reading is true? His whole theory was that people are going to start to revert back to being in person, going to meetings. Sales people are going to be going in person a lot more because they want to trust that, oh, that's a real person, that's a real company. People are interviewing for jobs and they're having an AI kind of essentially give them the answers to the test. So yeah, I guess that was a long-winded question. Like, do you feel like we're going to get to a point where we won't trust that we're not seeing something that's fake AI?
It's a complicated question, but I'll answer it because I think it's entertaining to answer. There are a lot of facets. The first facet is there's a pendulum, and I think we've absolutely swung to one end of that pendulum. And what I mean by that is I don't think that social interaction on application on your phone is social interaction. I think that's nonsense. I think social interaction happens in front of you and everyone knows it. And you can sit and have a conversation with somebody through Zoom like we are, and it is an interaction, but it does not replace sitting in a room, having a drink. It doesn't matter what you drink, and I don't care. And talking about stuff, current events, or people around you, or whatever, and sharing a meal and engaging. And if you're the type of person who can actually sit and have that conversation and not look at your phone the whole time, it's a different experience. If you live inside of your phone and your version of social, and I'll put it in quotes because I don't think it's actually social, is Facebook, Instagram, and all the rest of that stuff, you already can't tell reality from fake. And I don't think it has anything to do with AI, right? Because look, social media influencers are not reality. They're showing you the best version of whatever they're doing at any moment in time. Why do they all, quote unquote, have a crash later when they weren't really telling the truth? Of course they weren't telling the truth, right? The idea that the news broadcast is true used to be a thing, but it's always been opinion. Always. Why do you have different stations in the same market? If it was just a fact, you'd only have one. Okay, but people don't think of the world that way. People don't recognize the amount of entertainment that's been presented to them as fact. As an example, when you go to the movies and you see based on a true story, do you mean or interpret that to say that everything in that movie is true? Or do you interpret that to say, which is what they mean when they put it on the screen, we took a story that was actually based in someone's thing and then we've embellished the heck out of it to sell tickets and popcorn.
Yeah.
Right? That's not real, but we're fine with that because we've decided that that's acceptable. And I'm not trying to argumentatively talk to you about this. I'm trying to say, hey, frame this the right way, right?
Yeah.
So are we going to see AI content? We're already being flooded with it. Will we be able to differentiate it? Honestly, I can easily prompt an AI right now to write a story that you'd never know was written by an AI. That's easily done. Same with image generation coming shortly. Same with video production. Is that important? My comment then being, if you're looking at a video and it's entertaining and it was based on a true story, but it's not true, does it lose value? If you're looking at a marketing message and it looks like regular humans, but it's not, it's all AI, it's a marketing message. Does it need fact? I don't know. Now, the next question is, what about, political or news or commentary, or like if there's a war and there's a correspondent covering the war and they're an AI bot and they're pro the aggressor on the left side and against the aggressor on the right side. I don't know what I'm trying to say. The idea being, there's propaganda bots out there. I hate to bring crashing reality down on everybody's head, but there's propaganda bots all over the place and have been for decades. Every country has them. And the idea that, we have free press, yes, but they're all opinionated. If they weren't opinionated, everybody would read the Wall Street Journal and the Los Angeles Times and get the same story. But they don't. So my point in this context is, I think the AI versions of that are going to end up with the same slants, for lack of a better word. I don't know if slant's the best answer, and I think the pendulum that I was referring to is we've swung to the idea of, you can have social interactions and never actually meet the person or talk to the person, and they can be anywhere in the country or world. Yes, you can, but it's not the same thing as the people you sit down and have dinner with. That's not the same level or grade of social interaction. And it's the same with this material is AI generated and it provides X value. This material I'm seeing with my own eyes in person in real time, and it provides Y value, and they're not the same.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. I was just kind of curious to get your opinion on it, because again, you're in it. You've got a podcast about it, so why not ask an expert, right?
Yeah, and that is, I think that we haven't solved or even gotten to the point where we're ready to have the equation yet of what exactly that's going to look like dynamically. I do think everybody's rushing to try and figure out answers to it. I have a suspicion that there's going to be a pendulum swing that has to go the other direction before we kind of self-correct from where we are. I think we're a little too far into the you can do everything without touching a person. At some point.
I mean, you see it with work, right? You see everybody went fully remote, and that was the best thing since sliced bread. And now, a lot of companies are, while productivity was still the same or better with remote work, now we're starting to see that it's kind of waning. And so more people are more doing the hybrid thing. I think 5 days a week in office. If I was going back to a corporate job, I would not be a fan of that. But some type of a hybrid structure is probably the right thing in my mind, because I do think having that randomness that you don't get on Zoom meetings. I don't know how many times I would bump into people, at the cafeteria or in the elevator and be like, oh, I got to talk to you about something, right? Or I talked to this guy, you should talk to them. You don't have that, if you've got prescriptive Zoom meetings every day.
Right. Now, I think, again, the pendulum, and I think we've swung to one direction, and I'd like to see us come back a little bit. I don't think we go back to everybody has to commute. You're only allowed to be in the office. You don't get paid if you're not. I don't think that happens. But yeah. Well, Justin, we went all over the place, but I think it was a great conversation. I think it was fun.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Thanks very much. We'll see if maybe we'll come back and talk again. Obviously, we have more we can talk about.
Well, AI is going to continue to evolve. So, we could probably talk tomorrow and there'll be an update from what we talked about today. But no, it's been a lot of fun.
Thanks a lot.